And we're rolling.
Okay, as I always say, if you speak or you step into my little circle here, you will be on YouTube. So is there anything you want to say that you don't want recorded, say it to me after the camera's off. We got a nice little mix here. We got some people who are at these lectures for the first time. We got people who joined us last week and are back. We have people that were here the first time but couldn't make it or couldn't stay last time, but they're here today. And then we have people that have been here for all of it. So these are all on YouTube if you need to do a little catch up at some point. A brief recap for everyone who needs one. We got it right here. So basically, the main theme of these lectures has been the ecumenical councils, but I've also been talking about the growth of the church in major centers and the liturgical rites and also the imperial shifts that have occurred. So Nicaea and Constantinople basically hashed out the doctrine of the Trinity, with Nicaea saying that Christ is God and Constantinople confirming that the Holy Spirit is God. Nobody seemed to question that the Father is God, but I'm sure that will spike up one day. I hope not, but you never know. And it also was that the Trinity is three persons and three hypostases, okay? And then Ephesus and Chalcedon dealt with, okay, how is Christ God and man? So Ephesus condemned like a radical division within our Lord, and Chalcedon condemned the ousting of a nature or the swallowing up of one, saying that he is in two natures. However, these councils caused a lot of controversy with churches that actually still exist to this very day in 2026. And now we're going to see how this all unfolds. So, because of the Council of Chalcedon not being accepted by the churches in Alexandria and Antioch, by the mid-6th century, we have two patriarchates of Alexandria and two of Antioch, right? So the Coptic church and the Syriac church, those are the churches that did not accept the Council of Chalcedon that still exists to this day. And the Church of Axum, or now what we know as Ethiopia, they also followed the Coptic church in that, as well as the Church of Armenia. And at this point, Georgia is non-Chalcedonian, or you could say they're not Chalcedonian. They haven't actually taken a hard stance yet, and that will change fairly quickly. We also see that the Iranian Empire has taken over what we now know as Georgia and Armenia, and most of the western part of the Roman Empire is now broken up into a bunch of barbarian kingdoms who follow Arian Christianity that, all the way back to Nicaea that was dealing with. Rome itself is still in the empire though, but a lot of the other parts of the West are not. And I think that covers everything from before, so we're gonna get right into it. So I mentioned that we have churches that, are not cool with Chalcedon. We also have the Persian church, which is not okay with Ephesus, or at least they keep going back and forth on it. And when someone accepts it, the other bishops try to get them killed and often succeed in that. So right before the first thing on your notes here, which we have physical handouts now today. We're getting really fancy, guys. But you've got it on your phone. Okay, cool. All right, great. Well, there is at least one extra handout if someone needs it. So basically, what led to this council is a few things. One is that the non-Chalcedonians are saying, at Chalcedon, you reinstated people that were against Saint Cyril, that supported Nestorius. Why would you do this? We can never accept this council if you accept these people. And what was interesting is that the leader of the Persian church right before this, in somewhere between 540, 552, he comes over to the Roman Empire. He even meets with Saint Justinian, the emperor, to defend the legacy of Theodore of Mopsuestia, who we realized was kind of like the forerunner of the Nestorian heresy. Nestorius was saying that our Lord had two hypostases in him. And I realized I never defined what a hypostasis is. Should I do this, or do you just want to keep the mystery alive?
Yeah, would you?
All right, let's do it. So, okay, I gotta sneak this in here. Can everyone see if I put it here, or should I erase some of this?
That should be fine.
Okay, great, cool. So, hypostasis. Now, a lot of Greek words are compound, and then they kind of take on a different meaning when you combine them. We should know this, because the word orthodox, right, it's straight glory, but together it means like right belief or correct teaching, okay? Same thing with the word Catholic. It means in accordance with the whole, but together it means fullness, right? So same thing, hypostasis, hypo means under, and stasis is like a standing. It's funny because this word is very hard to understand. Like actually, but when it's put together like this, it actually has a very ambiguous, broad meaning, which is part of why there's fights over how to use this word. It basically is an underlying reality. So the basic, do I even want to say substance? I think that's safe to say. The basic substance of something, but it's made concrete in, well, yeah, so I guess if we're going to go with substance, it's a substance made concrete in reality, or it's the underlying reality of something that is made concrete, okay? And to us right now, we're just like, okay, random, but in Greek philosophy, and obviously in early church theology, it was extremely important, right? Because this word has obviously caused a lot of problems, or well, the word didn't, the misunderstanding of the word did, rather. And so, because we confirm that the Trinity is three persons, and each person of the Trinity has its own hypostasis, it is weird to say our Lord then has two hypostases of his own, right? And obviously, Nestorius and then the Persian church, they had ways of massaging this and saying, this and that. And when they point to Theodore of Mopsuestia, who was from around this era, he was a Greek speaker, but he was from, I think, either right outside of Antioch or maybe Antioch itself, I can't recall. He taught that Christ had two prosopa, which kind of means face or a character, and it's the word that came to mean person. So when Nestorius says, no, like I got my stuff from this guy, the rest of the church is like, oh, that's interesting. That's very interesting. Because he died in good standing and no one ever called him out. And so when Abba I, who is the leader of the Persian church, comes to meet with Saint Justinian in the mid-6th century here, that's his argument. He says, our Lord in Nestorius was only following Theodore of Mopsuestia. How can you condemn him? And Saint Justinian's like, well, watch me. I can, because this is a problem. He split Christ, and that's that. So, the Second Council of Constantinople is held in 553 at the Hagia Sophia, right? The Church of the Holy Wisdom. And there's 152 bishops there. It condemns the writings of Theodoret of Cyrus, who was somebody that technically was reconciled back into the church at the Council of Chalcedon. But if you remember, even when St. Cyril reconciled with John of Antioch, Theodoret still resisted. It wasn't until pretty much he was cornered at the Council of Chalcedon that he recanted his stance. So specifically, this condemns his writings against Cyril. There's an argument about whether Theodoret is actually condemned himself or if it's just his writings. Oddly enough, there are some like Russian texts that refer to him as the Blessed Theodoret. I don't understand how he is blessed in any way, but that is a story for another time. Then you have Ibas of Edessa, right? Writings from him are condemned because he is somebody, you remember Bar Sama of Nisibis that I made mention of, who got the patriarch of the Persian church assassinated because he accepted the Council of Ephesus. So he told the Iranian Shah, or the emperor, that he betrayed the empire. Well, Bar Sama was a student of Ibas of Edessa, okay? So they condemned his writings. And then, of course, Theodore of Mopsuestia, who seems to be kind of like what's called the principal heresiarch here, as it were. They also did some other cleanup work. Origen of Alexandria, who died like a few centuries before this, is also condemned at this council. He was already condemned locally by his own church in Alexandria, but the rest of the church, they were kind of like, oh, well, he's got some good things, he's got some bad things. So this council actually condemned him. And they also, this is not written, but Dioscorus, who was the Pope of Alexandria that did not accept the Council of Chalcedon, and Severus, who was the Patriarch of Antioch that ultimately led to the split between, you know, the Chalcedonian and the non-Chalcedonian churches of Antioch, they are condemned at this council. So they kind of waited, but then we condemned them at this synod. And the non-Chalcedonians, or what we call the Oriental Orthodox churches, they venerate Dioscorus and Severus as saints when we have condemned them. So, the condemnation of Theodore of Mopsuestia didn't sit well with everybody. It caused a schism in the West, known as the three-chapter schism. So each of these guys, Theodoret, Ebus, and Theodore, each of their section of writings was known as a chapter. So they were condemning the three chapters. But there were many in the West who didn't like this. They said Theodore of Mopsuestia, and even Theodoret, for some reason, they were like, these guys are big wigs. They were very influential. I mean, Ebus of Edessa used to teach at their school there. So, and just a reminder, I mentioned this last time, Edessa is kind of like well, again, not to scale, okay? But Edessa is like somewhere in here. So it pretty much has shifted between the Roman and the Iranian empires a lot over the years. It's about as far west as the Iranian Empire has gotten, and as far east as the Roman Empire has gotten during this time period. And Father David actually made mention last time of these other Western liturgical traditions, including the Ambrosian. And it was shortly after that I was double checking some research, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. A lot of what we know as the Ambrosian liturgical rite, as some would call it, is actually a result of this schism. So, because the Diocese of Milan did not accept the condemnation of these people, as well as a few others, and they made their own patriarchate of Aquila. Is that how I would say it? Aquileia. Ooh, that sounds way fancier. Aquileia. Yeah, so they set up their own patriarchate in Aquileia, and Milan followed them. And so those dioceses, they developed, I mean, there was already some unique things. If we know the expression, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, we've all heard this, yes? Yeah. That comes from St. Ambrose of Milan, corresponding with St. Augustine and St. Monica, when they're like, what do we do when we're in Rome, and like it's different, and in Milan, like it's different, and then even down in Hippo, it's not the same. And he says, when in Rome, you fast as the Romans fast, or you do as the Romans do. So there was already variety in the West going on. But the particular tradition a lot of people point to that they call the Ambrosian actually largely does not come directly from St. Ambrose. It comes from this schism that occurred. Now, the Iberians, who, remember, they're the people that became the Georgians. Their monarchy ends. The Iranians put an end to that. Remember, they did the same with the Armenians. The Iranians mean business, okay? And then 11 years later, Rome actually takes some of what we now call Georgia. So I actually don't remember the scale offhand, but basically, yeah, they get a little sliver there. Something, yeah. And then in 607, the Georgian church officially accepts the Council of Chalcedon, okay? And when this happens, they pretty much abandoned the Cappadocian liturgical rite. If you recall, Armenia and Iberia were evangelized by people from Cappadocia, so that's the liturgical rite that they had adopted. But I guess because this was associated now with being Armenian and therefore non-Chalcedonian, they decide to not do that rite anymore. Some of my Armenian friends claim that there was like a whole burning of books and everything. I mean, that sounds really like legendary, but I don't know. Well, I don't want to say one way or the other because I love my Armenian friends. It's just that sounds very hyperbolic to me, that there'd be a special burning of all the Cappadocian liturgical books. But basically, Georgia liturgically becomes very Persian, okay, at this point. It makes sense because they're in the Iranian Empire. But they also start getting some Byzantine influence from Constantinople as well, now that they've accepted the Council of Chalcedon. Because pretty much in the East, if you're Chalcedonian, then you're Constantinopolitan, right? You're what we would now call a Byzantine, okay? And that's what happens as they start to encroach on each other's turf because they're no longer in communion with each other. And if you thought that was the end of it, it is not. It's not. And I'm clutching at my pearls here, okay? got these from our friend who went to Hawaii, and they've been blessed, which means everything I say is infallible. No, I'm just kidding. I will say this, working on this particular thing, like I lost more hair because things get really dicey, okay? First talk, all those groups are gone, so we can just dance on their grave and like whatever. Last talk, again, remnants of or the churches themselves are still around, but this one's like cleanup work from everything, and it's just like, if I were to give a real play-by-play, this would have been like a book, but I had to trim this down to what you see in front of you. Do you have any questions so far, or should I just keep trucking? I knew it. What do you
I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Yeah.
We're getting close to the formation of the Islamic religion, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's on here.
Okay.
Oh yeah, it's coming.
Right. All right.
Ready or not, here it comes. Yes, sir. So we got this guy, Sergius, who is the patriarch of Constantinople, okay, 610. And the emperor, Heraclius. And they're like, what do we do about this? We got these non-Chalcedonians who are championing what St. Cyril of Alexandria said, right? Mia physis, okay, one nature. But within that one nature, it's fully human and fully God. And then the Council of Chalcedon ruled it's diophysis, two natures, right? God and man. And they're like, how do we come up with a compromise? Because we're fighting over this stuff and it's inconvenient for the empire. So they said, what if we get everyone to agree that Christ is in two natures, but his energy is one? And we'll say Mia energy, because they like this Mia stuff, these guys, right? So we'll say it's Mia energy. And at this time, there are these texts that are attributed to Saint Dionysius the Areopagite, who's like in the Bible, okay? Now people call it pseudo Dionysius. They say he didn't write them. I'm not getting into all that. The point is they're attributed to him. Both sides, the Chalcedonian and non-Chalcedonian sides, are reading this guy as if he is from the 1st century. And they're both like, see, he backs up what we say. They're like literally just yelling at each other. And he uses the expression theandric, okay? That means like God-man, right? He says everything Christ does is theandric. His nature is theandric. His energy is theandric. So they're like, okay, we're all into this theandric stuff. So this will work. We're gonna have me a good time with this, but it's not a good time. So while this happens, the Iranians take over basically this whole neck of the woods here. I can't remember if they do Cappadocia or not, but yeah, they got historic Syria, Palestine, and Egypt. Yeah, all the way there. They got them. Checkmate. So the empire is shrinking now. Wait, they don't have this though. Ethiopia, or Axum is still free for now. And so things are getting tense. However, 628, the Roman Empire takes it back. I'm not erasing it. Just use your imagination. Okay, so they take it back. So now they're on a high. They're like, okay, we're on top of the world again. And incidentally, that same year, the Persian church reunites with the Orthodox Catholic Church. They say, yeah, we're good with Ephesus and Chalcedon. Yay. It's not going to last, though. But it happens here. And I don't know that them reconquering this area really had much to do with that, but it is interesting that it occurs the same year. Well, we get this guy named Cyrus in 631. Now, Cyrus is actually from Colchis, which is like northern Georgia. So he gets sent over to Alexandria to be their patriarch or their pope, right? And Cyrus is pretty big on this Mia energy stuff, and he gets violent with it when the Coptic church will not cooperate with him. There is a story of the Coptic pope at the time, I think his name was Benjamin. He went into hiding because this Cyrus guy was so intense, and he tortured his brother to death to find him, and he still didn't find him. So yeah, this guy's like not a good guy. And he also holds a secular government office, which is literally against the canons, and I don't remember offhand if we made those canons after the fact, or if they were already a rule. But this guy, he kind of likes to be in charge. He kind of likes power, right? That's why he's doing a lot of this stuff. So Cyrus begins this brutal campaign to enforce Mia energism like violently, okay? And then the following year, we have the Islamic Caliphate, right? It forms down in like Arabia and the Persian Gulf, okay? 632. That's the year that Muhammad died, right? I think so. I think I was double checking that at some point. Also, Cyrus of Alexandria. I'm just gonna put his name because he's such a bad guy. He's kind of important. He actually corresponded with Muhammad during his lifetime, and apparently they got along well. So that's also very sketchy. But then again, I mean, Muhammad did try to like be nice to like the people when he first walked in, right? And then if you didn't comply, that's when it was. But yeah, so Sophronius, who's the patriarch of Jerusalem, the following year, 633, he hears about this Mia energism stuff, and he says, "This is fake. You're mono-energists. Your human energy is dormant. The way you explain this to me, it is not cool. It is an extension of the Monophysite heresy, and I will not accept it." So this gets all the way to Rome 2 years later, Pope Honorius of Rome. And what's written to him is basically they're saying, look, it's important that Christ has one energy, but like, what about his wills? So like literally they're called out on the energy and they change their mind. They're like, oh, okay, fine. One will, right? And that's what thele is, right? Or they call it miatheletism. So they write to Pope Honorius and he says, well, of course, Christ does not have two conflicting wills. I would never say he does. He is a human will perfected by divinity. Yeah, I see the look on your face, because you're like, I could see that going a certain way, but I can also see this like not working out too well, okay? While that's going on, the Islamic Caliphate takes over this whole neck of the woods here, okay? Antioch, Jerusalem, Greater Syria, and Palestine, okay? It belongs to the Caliphate now. And the following year, the Armenians, who already had kind of a strong presence in Jerusalem, they actually set up their own patriarchate there. And that's important because, you know, this ecclesiology that we like live right now, okay? Like, let's see, over in Boulder, there's a Greek church, right? But we're Antiochian, okay? And you go down to Lakewood, there's a Serbian and there's an Antiochian church, right? So this kind of thing with like overlap of churches that are in union with each other, the non-Chalcedonians were doing it first, right? Because Jerusalem probably had a large Syriac population, but the Armenians were just like, well, okay, great. Now we're going to set up our own. And then we're going to see that unfold where each of the non-Chalcedonian churches kind of become very independent. They're still in communion with each other, but they don't care when they go somewhere else that there's already like a sister church there. They're like, okay, that's great. You do your thing. We're going to do ours. And that starts now. That starts very early, 7th century.
I think Stefan has a question.
Oh, hey, I just missed it. I looked down.
When the Islamic Caliphate took over that region there, did the Christian church have to sort of go into hiding? Was there...
No. So Saint Sophronius actually met with the, would it be the Caliph? I think, because it's a caliphate, right? And he basically is just like, all right, what are your terms, right? Because he saw that it was over. And it's interesting because the caliphate, the caliph asks him, what shall we call your people? Okay, because there's a lot of different groups there. And he actually, remember I told you about this term Melkite last time? The non-Chalcedonians referred to us as Melkites because we were the king's people, because the empire favored the Council of Chalcedon. So he said, refer to us as Melkites because we are the king's people. And that was kind of like a play, because Christ is king. That was like the subtext there. But he also meant we're loyal to whoever the king is, implying we're not going to give you any problems type thing, okay? So it was kind of a multifaceted statement. So now there are, I mean, again, like the history of Islam and Christianity can be its own kind of thing, right? There's times where they get on, and there's times where they don't. There's times where like, you know what, we actually want you to become Muslim, and some do, and the ones that don't get killed. And I mean, we still see that to this day, right? There are areas of the Middle East where the Christians and the Muslim actually get on okay. There's others where like they technically get along, but you kind of know that like the Muslims are in charge. And then there's other ones where it's just like literally impossible to be a Christian, and if you are one, they probably don't know that you exist. Yeah, or they will kill you. So that has varied. It depends on a lot of other factors. when the Roman, I think Saint Justinian, right, when he was emperor, he did tax like heretical groups. He's like, if you're going to exist and inconvenience my empire, then you're going to pay me for it. So the Muslims kind of built off that with like what's called the well, there's the jizya, and then there's the what's it called, dhimmi, and I don't remember if they like differ in any way, but basically it's a tax to exist. They respect your existence. But the big thing, though, is under Islamic rule, Christians cannot try to convert people to Christianity. Even if they respect you for being one, you're not allowed to promote it, you're not allowed to evangelize. And even in some of the countries, so at the time, all we really have, right, are Chalcedonian and non-Chalcedonian. They're not allowed to switch under the Islamic. And now, in our current year, where there's more groups there, you're not allowed to switch over. So you can't convert to another kind of Christianity under them either. You just have to stay what you are. So yeah, that is the reality that unfolds right there. So Heraclius is Roman Empire. He's still standing strong, but he writes this thing called the Ekthesis, which is promoting the miathelitism that I just mentioned before, right? They've moved on from energy. That experiment didn't work. So they're like, aha, let's do this instead. While that's going on, then the caliphate reaches Egypt, and they take over. Guess who negotiated the surrender of Egypt? This guy, Cyrus, the patriarch, because remember, he was also a government official. So he's really not very well liked by anybody, by the Chalcedonians or the non-Chalcedonians. And it is very interesting to me because, we talked, Subdeacon Alexander and I had a bit of a postlude that is actually on the video on YouTube if you go and watch it, about the dynamic between us and the Oriental Orthodox in the modern day. And one of the things that has happened is someone like Cyrus gets remembered on our end as being a non-Chalcedonian, even though he was the Greek patriarch of Alexandria. But because he pushed something to try to force a union, popular mindset associates him with them, but they associate him with us because he technically was one of us. So they're like, oh, the Byzantines were mean to us. And I'm not denying that was ever the case, but in this instance, he wasn't really one of us either. Like, technically he was, but he was really just a bad dude. And it's unfortunate with characters like this, they actually drive the divide worse between our churches, even though they claim they're trying to bring about union. So 645, the final schism with the Persian church occurs. And the reason really isn't anything super spectacular. It's the patriarch that enacted that last union just died, and they decided not to renew the contract, like so to speak. They're just like, nah, Ephesus, no way. Some of them claim that they're okay with Chalcedon. And if you remember, that also kind of messed up the minds of the non-Chalcedonians as well, because Nestorius himself said he was okay with the Council of Chalcedon, and it's like, what is going on? So they stand on their business going, Chalcedon, fine. Ephesus, no way. And so that is the last schism with them that occurs. Sad day. Now this man, this legend, St. Maximus the Confessor, he's a monk in Constantinople. He flees, so first he moves to Alexandria, but then he flees to Rome because this the so-called Miathelite thing is really coming to a head there. And he's uncomfortable. He's like, I don't like where this is going. And of course, what does he say? He says, similar to what St. Sophronius said, your human will in Christ is dormant, therefore you're not really Mia, you're mono. And they chase him out. So he goes to Rome and he appeals there and says, yeah, help me. So the Roman emperor, Constans II, he writes this thing called the Typos, where he forbids any discussion of will and energy. He's like, enough guys, this is too much. Our empire's literally falling apart. Okay, enough. Stop it, shut up. Don't talk about these things anymore. And then the following year, St. Martin, the Pope of Rome, condemns the Typos and Constans and the Ekthesis of Heraclius at one of his Lateran councils. So a lot of these local synods were being held right? We've got the ecumenical councils, but throughout from the beginning of the church to this very day, there are local synods that are held, and so that was one of the local ones. So in Rome, they just condemned this right off. They just said, yeah, this is not going in a good direction. So have you ever heard the expression, the enemy of my enemy is my friend? Well, I don't know if it holds true in this case, but the Islamic Caliphate demolishes the Iranian Empire. It takes over all of Persia and all that. Done. So you're kind of like, I don't know if this is good. I don't know that this is a good thing, right? That's the end of an era, in a sense. The Iranian, what's it called? The royal lineage continues for a while, but the actual empire is gone at that point. And I think the lineage just ended in like the 1970s or something, like that, like straight. Yeah. So I mean that's a pretty impressive line. But in terms of what we know is the Iranian Empire, that is taken over by the Caliphate, and then of course they get Armenia, which is already with the Iranian Empire, but they stand strong for a few years. And then by 662, St. Maximus has his tongue cut out and his right hand cut off, and he's exiled, and he dies shortly thereafter because they didn't send him to a hospital. They just, yeah. So
Although
that
we must add that his hand was restored by the Mystery Theotokos. Isn't he one?
No.
Isn't he one?
No, he was not so lucky. That's different. That's a guy with that was like wielding a sword, right?
I thought it was St. Maximus. But I may be wrong. I just thought that. No, it's fair enough.
Tongue was still out, even if that was the case. What do you know, Father? Okay, I will double check that, but I am fairly certain, that was not the case, because he died from like wounds of his, infections from the wounds that he got. So what's important to note here, like I was saying, right? These Mia Mono Thelites, Mia Mono Energists, they're just as brutal to us as they are to the non-Chalcedonians. They are just wicked people who, understandable in the midst of all this, you'd want a united church because the empire is falling apart, but they're compromising, and when they're called out on it, they don't like it, so they just kill the people. So the Third Council of Constantinople, which we say is the Sixth Ecumenical Council now, was held. And if you look, that's the longest an ecumenical council has taken, right? November 680 to September 681. It's like, 10 months or something? The other ones, like the longest ones were like 3 months. This is 10 months. They are really trying to hash this out. And it's held in the Imperial Palace. I'm pretty sure that wasn't even a church. Remember, Nicaea was held at a palace because they didn't have churches big enough to fit all the bishops. But every subsequent one has been held at a church. This is back at the palace. 300 bishops total, but not all at once. Anywhere from 37 to 174 at a given time. It took so long. Imagine a bishop like, hey guys, I'm going to be away for a while. He's gone for 10 months. You're like, no way.
Yeah.
So, and this is convoked by Saint Constantine VI. So he was the emperor, and he is a saint of the church, and he condemned monoenergism, monothelitism. He condemned all these. Like Sergius of Constantinople, definitely Cyrus of Alexandria condemned him like all the way to hell. And everything that Saint Martin did at the Lateran as well. So he condemned Constans and Heraclius and all anyone that pushed the energy and the will thing. And then there's a famous line that comes from this. Well, what do we think about the wills of Christ? And it's the human will willed what the divine will willed it to will. Be better if I said like with the liturgical English. The human will willed what the divine will willed it to will. Yeah, that does sound a lot better. Yeah. So basically, Christ has two wills that are in harmony. And so this is what, I feel like Pope Honorius was trying to say, that the human was like perfected by the divine, but like the language was not so clear. Oh, he gets condemned too, I am pretty sure. But either way, so we rule on that. And then this tribe, this Turkic tribe that comes from somewhere in like what we now call like southern Russia, maybe, I don't know, but like Russia's a big place, called the Bulgars. They start invading our empire. Just, okay, hi, hello. Like, so we just resolve this, and then another enemy tribe comes at us. But I think, you know, now that in the modern day we have a Bulgarian Orthodox Church, I can think you can bet how that went for us eventually. Not right away though, but eventually. So, but at the time they're bad and they're pagan. We thought we were done with pagans. We're like, we got Arians, we got non-Chalcedonians, we got Nestorians. Now we got Muslims, but pagans. Oh yes, hi, still here. Wow. There should be TV shows made about this stuff. You know what I mean? So 685. We have a schism with a group called the Maronites. Now, today, people know Maronites as Lebanese Roman Catholics, okay? And they become that later. But at the time, remember in my first lecture, I said that even though each of these areas has like a dominant liturgical rite, they're not bound to their area per se, right? Like people move and they take their liturgy with them a lot of times. The Maronites were just that. They were from Edessa, so they had the Persian liturgy, but they moved to, you know, like, what we now refer to as Lebanon, and they had a monastery and some associated things there. So they were like Edessian or Persian monks that were in this area. So even though the Persian church didn't accept Ephesus and went into schism, we still had Georgia, right, that was following the Persian liturgy, and the Maronites up until now. They actually did not accept the condemnation of monothelitism. The modern day Maronites deny this. They say the Byzantines lied and made this up about them, but history speaks for itself, okay? So I'm not going to get into all that. Maybe in a later lecture, if I do like, you know, the latter half of church history, I will. But just so you know, like that schism occurs. Then in 692, something called the Quintisext Council occurs. And this is known as the Council of Trullo, or Trullis, same imperial palace. Basically, Constantinople II and III didn't issue any canons, okay? The other councils did. So this council, Quintisext, literally means fifth, sixth. Okay, but it's between the 6th and 7th, you know, 6th, 7th. So, so I had to get in there. So they issue a lot of canons, and this is actually not that it's controversy. Saint Bede, the Venerable of Jarrow, all the way out west, he refers to this synod as reprobate because he thinks it's anti-Western. And to be sure, the canons here are very like Byzantine centered, right? They assume these canons like are within a Byzantine context. So it sounds like some of the Western things that are going on, they're not fans of. Certain things that, you know, the Coptic and Syriac and Armenian and Ethiopian churches are doing that may not be bad in and of themselves. They're like, we don't do this. But there are Eastern Orthodox Christians to this day who claim this is an ecumenical council. It's an extension of 5 and 6. I've had arguments with people about this. Because in terms of Byzantine canon law, yes, these are authoritative within a Byzantine context. And I don't know if I should say this publicly on camera, but I will. Technically, as Western Rite, we don't follow a lot of what's in Trullo. And I will stand on that and say we don't have to. It's not Byzantine. Let's go. Infallible Hawaiian necklace here.
Don't question.
Yeah. It was blessed by a priest of the Row Corps. So, row your core. Okay, sorry. Anyway. Oh, we're almost done. Wow, okay. What's my time on here so far, just so I know? I'm gonna break my rule and look over. Oh, cool. I'm like way ahead of schedule. I'm gonna stretch, take a little break. No. Okay. So remember I said the non-Chalcedonians start kind of encroaching on each other's turf, and it's like actually not that big of a deal. So because of a lot of this stuff going on, there's Syriac monks that come to Egypt. And actually, the Coptic Church embraces them and says, okay, hello, our sister church, we're going to give you some abandoned buildings that we have. If you recall, there was the Julianist sect, okay? The Julianists were actual monophysites. They believed that Christ's flesh was incorruptible. That's how much his natures had been mixing. His flesh could not be damaged, which obviously messes up the whole passion and everything, right? So the Julianists were gone by then, yay, and they left a monastery. So the Coptic Church gave the Syriacs this monastery that had belonged to the Julianists. They said, we're not using it, so welcome, come on over. So we see this migration occurring. I don't remember the reason because the caliphate is over both these areas. So I don't think they pushed them out of there, but I don't recall offhand. Speaking of the caliphate, then they take over the rest of northern Africa, okay? Which I think was that still part of the Roman Empire? I think it was, yeah. I got my history experts here, you know, because I can't remember all this stuff. And then they get up to a different Iberia, mind you, right? By 711, that's what the chain is named after. No, it's not, but wouldn't that be hilarious? The caliphate takes over the Iberian Peninsula, which is like southern Spain and Portugal. Not the same Iberia that was here, no connection between the two names. I researched this thoroughly for like 10 minutes, and there's no connection between that being called Iberia when it was and then this. So, Rome, so Spain, I don't know, it's somewhere here, right? So, this is also where a liturgical tradition called the Mozarabic comes into more significance, right? Again, Spain and Portugal had their own usages, if you will, like all these other local areas did, but a lot of what people think of as like the Mozarabic rite or the Mozarabic liturgical tradition is largely because that's where the word comes from, right? Mozarab, because the Arab-speaking Muslims took them over and influenced the development of their local liturgy. And finally, so in 698, there's already remnants from the 3 chapters schism, remember that? Reconciling with the church, but by 715, it's resolved. So think about that. That lasted, I did the math beforehand, now I forgot.
17. Oh, sorry.
So if it's 553 till 715, that's like 160 something years, right? It's a long time. So again, they've developed their own unique liturgical tradition, and the church allows them to keep it. And that's why the Ambrosian liturgy, and actually to this day, the Roman Catholic Church actually still has the Ambrosian and the Mozarabic liturgies in very small pockets. Orthodox attempts at them have not actually been as successful, but that's a lecture for another time. But at this point, so that's the scene of things. The West was already just taken over by all these Arians, and now the Muslims are coming for them. Okay, and I mean, so pretty much the Roman Empire as we know it is just what? It's just that, I think. Maybe some of this area, I would need to look at a map to like remember, but that's that. So this is a very scary time in church history. If maybe right before the last lecture was like the golden age, this is the real dark age. Actually, wait, is this when some people say that the so-called Dark Ages are? I think, right? Because it starts with the fall of the West in the 5th century, right? Is that? I don't know the latest hype. I'm sorry. I just know the truth. I don't. Any comments, questions, concerns, critiques, foreshadowings, predictions, meditations?
Maybe you could just answer a clarifying question for me.
Yes.
So, if the Muslims took Spain and Portugal, did they go north from Africa via boats, or did they come around the top over Rome and Constantinople?
No, because again, I'm not to scale, right?
Yeah.
Basically, northern Africa like meets the southern end of the Iberian Peninsula. Like they don't touch, but I'm sure if you were like a
You
real
could swim in it. If you
I was about to say you could swim. I'm glad he said it. So you could swim from like Algeria to Spain if you really wanted to. So who knows? Maybe they did that, but they probably took boats and they went up and they're like, surprise.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's that. Yep.
Dark Ages, 5th century to 10th century.
There you go. So this is with what normies call the Dark Ages, but I would specify that it's dark because we got the rise of Islam, we got the splitting apart of the patriarchates over Chalcedon, we lost the Persian church because of the Ephesus and Nestorius thing, we got Bulgarian pagans coming our way now too, just when we thought we could rest easy. So I'm like really stressed just explaining it all. I can't imagine how they felt living it.
The crusade should be starting soon.
No, 400 years.
400 more years?
Yeah, 400 more years. Or wait, no. Well, if I'm capping at 715, 350-ish years. Because the Crusades probably solidified the schism between like the Roman Church and the Eastern Church, the Orthodox Church. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I don't.
No, you are very wise, and I like your questions, so keep them coming.
To rewind, this final schism with the Persian church in
Yes.
645.
Yeah.
Did you say the patriarch died and then they basically just didn't renew their?
Yeah, that's how I phrased it. Yeah, so basically, if you recall from the last lecture as well, the Persian church basically has leaders, right, which they elevated to the status of patriarch, that are like totally cool with these guys, but there's like local metropolitans and bishops that are not, and that's why, they got one of them killed. And then you get different dioceses that are meeting locally saying, don't like Ephesus, but we like Chalcedon, and others are going, we don't like either of them. And then others are like, you know what, maybe Ephesus isn't so bad. So when those people come into leadership, they can reunite the church. It is kind of weird though, because I do wonder at this point, there's so much anti-Ephesian or pro-Nestorian like thinking going on in this neck of the woods. Like, did everybody consent to like, yes, we are united with Rome and Constantinople and, the Chalcedonian churches of Antioch and Alexandria? Like, was every individual thinking that way? Like, I doubt it, I'll be honest. But the leaders were. And that decision to reunite may not have been without its controversy, which is why when he died, they said, no more of this, no more talking with these guys. And at this point, I don't remember if the Nestorians were already starting to build their own churches or not. I do know with the guy I mentioned in the beginning of the lecture, Abba I, he had a disciple in Alexandria who went all the way to India, because remember I told you last time, I haven't even touched India yet, but the Persian church oversees India. It's just that the Indian hierarchy is not directly involved in any of this, so I haven't mentioned them. But later on, India, they have radical Nestorianism, like things like the Trinity became incarnate inside of the Virgin Mary, because it's like, wow, that's insane, right? So India starts to go off and like really kind of be like extra Nestorian almost.
So that patriarch was sort of the cornerstone holding that union together. When he died, it's kind of like, yeah, we're not doing this anymore.
Exactly. And well, not to go too far ahead, but there will be remnants of the Persian church or the Persian tradition that still stay in union with the church for like a few centuries. And then even in the modern day, I mentioned to you guys, there's the Assyrian Church of the East now and the Ancient Church of the East, and both of their leaders actually live in Chicago, and they're from there, right? Because of, the whole moving thing and traveling. In the late 19th century, there are Assyrians who join the Russian church, and they keep their liturgy and everything. And unfortunately, it didn't last more than like 60, 70 years, but like actually, I think 1965 was the last bishop, and he was actually serving the Patriarchate of Antioch in what we now call Iraq. So even throughout that time, there's been times where, Assyrian or Persian or Chaldean Christians come into the Orthodox Church, can keep their liturgy. Currently, that's not, but I got a whole group on Facebook about it if you're interested. Like similar to how like we are Western Rite. Yeah, but we're not under Rome. We're under the Greek Patriarchate of Antioch, right? In America. How you like that for layers? So like the church is always open and willing to have people come back and keep their liturgy. Like this happened, in the West. The Ambrosian, liturgical tradition was largely from the 3-chapter schism, but the Roman Church embraced them when they came back, and they allowed them to keep, what was unique about their liturgy after 160 years. Very similar to what happened with our Western Rite. Like we don't cap and say everything you do has to be before whenever 1054, 1098, right? That actually wouldn't work, and we see that experiments like that did not work. Okay, right? Because liturgy is a living thing, and so people come with the history and the tradition to be respected, even if they are repenting of whatever errors they or their ancestors were holding to. Right, so I realize that's not what you asked, but that's where my mind went, because that's kind of where my mind always goes.
No, totally.
Because all rights matter.
That's good.
Yeah.
I do have to repent. I was wrong. It wasn't Saint Maximus whose hand was so. It was St. John Damascene. I know this.
Okay.
Google tells me.
I thought you were going to say the Ambrosian tradition is not its own right. I was like, yes. No, but Yeah, I'll take that too.
And so, with the condemnation of monoenergarianism and all that,
Yeah.
did that idea just end up kind of dying?
Yes. Oh, and actually, I'm glad. No one asked this, but I get. Well, no one asked this here, but I get asked it a lot. So because you asked what you said, I'm going to go ahead and approach the topic. People ask me, okay, if non-Chalcedonians are not actually Monophysites in the sense that we condemned, what is their view on energy and will, right? Because they were kind of sucked into this controversy, but if you notice, I didn't talk much about them because it was kind of like an inner Chalcedonian thing. So I would say, my friends that are, Oriental Orthodox, they are true Mia Energists and Mia Thelites, even though they don't really, speak that way. You do have, you're gonna be on YouTube now.
I know.
There is Severus of Antioch. Remember the guy that I said severed the Church of Antioch, right? Because he was the final split. He did talk a bit about energy and will. And I think even our father among the saints, Maximus the Confessor, does mention Severus of Antioch when he writes about this. He actually says, well, the conversation started with this guy. And look where it led to now, right? So, but if they truly are Cyrillian Miaphysites, then it makes sense that they logically would be actual Mia Energists and Mia Thelites in the sense that it is a true theandric action or activity or whatever else, like Saint Dionysius the Areopagite says. Obviously, as someone that is Chalcedonian, I stand by our teaching that it's two. But the two are not in opposition to each other, right? And they teach that it's one, but within that one, there is a distinction. And so, but the actual, the mono-energist and the mono-thelites and all that stuff with this dude and everyone else, it didn't last long because it wasn't even really a real thing, if that makes sense. It was just a way to force people to stay together, especially as the empire was falling apart. So if they had actually had real dialogues with some of these people that got to the understanding on both sides, maybe it could have been different. That's what I always think about with a lot of this stuff.
Anyway, Stefan, if I may, you may finish there. If people have questions
Okay.
or want to discuss,
Let's go.
Is it right?
Yeah.
Good.
I'll stand up here and talk all night if you let me, so.
I know you will.
I'll ask questions all night if you let me.
Very good, very good.
Let's go.
You look like a bishop now.
Careful what you wish for.
Careful,
No,
Father.
yeah. Careful what you predict. Let's see. Oh yeah, it's at the 52 mark. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and cap it.